In cutting edge technological innovation, vision might be a non negotiable ingredient, but it's starting to look like Cardano might be competing against a sightless giant. Ready? Let's go. It seems fair to say that if you're building out a system to run whole governments, whole economies, whole societies, you need to have a very well-defined vision of exactly what you want that network to do and how you want it to operate. It's starting to become very apparent that there is a big difference in how well-defined that vision is for Cardano versus its biggest competitor. Today we saw a flurry of dueling reports. Critics of Ethereum said that Ethereum Improvement Proposal 1559 was delayed and that this might even impact the timeline for Ethereum 2.0. Ethereum maximalists, of course, retorted that that's not the case at all. Ethereum Improvement Proposal 1559 is not delayed. Everything is perfectly on schedule. But looking into this did provide a good opportunity to kind of surveil the inner workings of Ethereum and try to get an idea of just how cohesive their overall vision is at this point, at least as to Ethereum 2.0 and the things that have to happen leading up to Ethereum 2.0. First of all, let's talk about what Ethereum is actually doing right now with this EIP 1559. Here's an interview with Tim Biko, who's the coordinator of the core developer conference call we're going to look at in just a second, and Xiao Wei, who's an Ethereum researcher. And in this article, they kind of lay out some of the parameters of this EIP 1559. But without getting too technical, we're going to give you a super high level overview here real quick. So currently in Ethereum, there is a standard sort of market for transaction fees that in the eyes of critics tends to produce very high costs to get a transaction into a block in the Ethereum blockchain. So EIP 1559 moves the framework to one of a base fee that gets burned and a priority fee that's been characterized as a tip that goes to the miner. Of course, this makes Ethereum users very hopeful that somehow this will make fees more manageable, and then maybe it'll even have a deflationary effect on the available supply of Ethereum, which famously doesn't have a hard cap like Cardano or Bitcoin. But the interviewer asks the right question here. They ask, it was said that EIP 1559 would reduce the income of miners by 10 to 30%. Is this accurate? And will it drive miners to invest more in MEV? You remember we did a video on MEV. MEV is miner extractable value. So Tim actually explains MEV a little bit down here. He says, as for MEV, this is paid by users who don't just want to be included in a block, but want to be included as the first transaction of the block because there are valuable arbitrage opportunities. For example, front-running transactions on decentralized exchanges. People are willing to pay a lot to miners to get the first slot in a block. So we've covered this before. And he also says, we've seen this grow a lot. Right now, about 60% of blocks have MEV transactions versus close to 0% at the start of the year. And this interview was published, at least to this website, on July 23rd. So we covered this in an earlier video. The thing that's going on is that when you go to make a transaction, let's say you're making a transaction in some coin, and the amount of that coin that you're buying or selling is going to cause a little slippage. It's going to change the price a little bit. Let's say you're spending enough that you're going to change the price of that coin a little bit, or there's some other way to create a little bit of a delta that provides an arbitrage opportunity based on your trade. So you can imagine this really easily. If you imagine a coin with not a lot of liquidity that's being traded in some DEX or something, and someone can look at that transaction and know that it's going to cause, let's say, the price of that coin to go up. So if they can pay the miner to have a transaction of theirs included prior to yours, they could just sandwich your transaction. Let's say you're buying and they know, hey, this is a coin with not a lot of liquidity. So when this person buys, the price is going to go up. So what this actor could do is create a transaction prior to yours where they buy the coin, then you buy the coin, the price goes up, and then they sell the coin they already bought after your transaction. So they've sandwiched your transaction between two of theirs, and they get the delta between the price they bought at and the price that the market reflected after your trade. The problem is, and then they sell after your transaction. The problem is, in a lot of cases, that means that you, as the transaction in the middle, end up paying a higher price because their transaction also, of course, affects the market. So Tim here is saying that about 60% of blocks have these minor extractable value transactions in them right now. So 60% of the time, in the block, there's somebody doing something like front running someone else's transaction on a decentralized exchange. Of course, critics of Ethereum call this a major flaw in the system. And a lot of Ethereum maximalists are kind of painting this as sort of like a function instead of a bug of the system. The interviewer here is asking the right question. They're like, hey, obviously not everybody loves MEV. Some people think it's a terrible flaw in the system, and it exploits people's trades. And the answer that was given was, so 1559 doesn't directly impact this, but because it lowers miner revenue a bit, some miners are looking to find other revenue sources. So it looks like Ethereum's kind of caught in this catch-22, right? The fees are not optimal. They are not good. Nobody likes the fees on the Ethereum network. A lot of people are not in love with the fact that there's no hard cap on Ethereum. There's no deflationary pressure. So the interviewer is asking, hey, if this EIP 1559 is reducing the amount of money miners are going to make, aren't they just going to go after miner extractable value even harder? For the people who think that this is a big problem with the network, and I think those people are coming to a logical conclusion there, doesn't this just make the MEV problem even worse? And the answer was, well, yeah, some miners are looking to find other revenue sources. The truth is, nobody knows. Will EIP 1559 have some kind of deflationary effect? Nobody knows. Will it cause miners to seek the servicing of MEV transactions even more? Nobody knows. It's kind of emblematic of the overall Ethereum thing that's been characterized as move fast and break things. They don't know. They don't know if it's going to have good effects, negative effects. Nobody really knows. It's understandable that they don't have time to necessarily come to a conclusion as to what's going to happen with this EIP 1559, because predictably, the move fast and break things ethos breaks things. Here we have the agenda for the Ethereum core developers meeting, and you can see here that Tim Biko is the organizer of this meeting. Here's the agenda, and this was the meeting that went down the same day as that article. If we scroll down below here to the comments to this agenda, you can see that we have a post here by Alexei Akunov. He says, I would like to say that there was an interesting discovery made during the Ropsten incident, which we need to be aware of. Because majority of miners use Geth, Geth is an Ethereum client implementation in Go. He's saying the majority of miners use Geth. Geth did not have the ability to repair Ropsten nodes that were past the bad block. Miners had to perform full sync, not a fast sync, not a snap sync, before they could start mining on the correct chain. This means that if something like that were to happen on the mainnet, there would be no way back, and Geth's version would need to become de facto the consensus rule. He says, in general, I think we need to have a better understanding about what we're going to do if X happens, where X is any of the issues that happened on the testnet. So here's where we need a little bit of background. So the Ethereum maximalists are all telling us that this EIP 1559 is going to go to mainnet scheduled for August 4th. So coming up really fast. This agenda was for the July 23rd meeting, same date as that interview we just talked about. Luckily, there's a post here telling us all about what this Ropsten incident was, and this is right from the Ethereum GitHub. So Ropsten is the test net that's being used to test all these things before deployment. In this overview, they say on July 21st, the Open Ethereum team noticed their node had stopped progressing on Ropsten at this block. The issue was in the Go Ethereum, that's Geth, the Go Ethereum implementation. And it was about how the Go Ethereum implementation checked the balance of the transaction sender for 1559, that's EIP 1559 style transactions, an invalid transaction whose sender balance covered only the effective gas used by the transaction, but not the transaction's maximum gas was included in a block. Because Ropsten miners were exclusively running Go Ethereum, this block was then accepted by other Go Ethereum miners despite being rejected by some other clients on the network. So the Geth implementation was checking the balance of the transaction in a way that created a bug where the transaction maybe shouldn't have been accepted. It wasn't accepted by specifically Open Ethereum, and Besu rejected the transaction block, while Nethermind, Go Ethereum, and Aragon accepted them. Thus, consensus issue, right? There was no consensus between the different clients about whether or not that block should have been included in the network. Obviously, this is the kind of thing that creates a fork where you have various clients being used on the network accepting a transaction into a block and other clients on the network not accepting the transaction into the block. That was the original Ropsten bug issue. I know that probably seems like way too much technical detail for some people, but the reason why we went into so much detail about that is because that was a comment to the agenda of this meeting, the Ethereum Core Developers meeting, the meeting that happened on July 23rd, just a few days ago. And they discussed Alexei's comments. The discussion, I think, was very insightful about the cohesiveness of the overall Ethereum vision. At 35 minutes and 41 seconds to the call, somebody asked, I think, an important but innocent question. And the conversation that ensued is really interesting. I'm going to paraphrase from my best recollection here, but I highly recommend you go back and listen to this yourself. It's available on the Ethereum Foundation's YouTube channel, and it is the Ethereum Core Developer meeting from July 23rd of 2021. So this person basically asked, and again, I'm paraphrasing, so I may make mistakes here in terms of what phrases I use. You can go back and listen to it yourself if you want to hear exactly how they said it. But he basically asked, if there's a bug in Geth on mainnet, what are everybody's expectations about how it will go down? The first answer was poorly. And then this conversation kind of ensued, and people started using some pretty scary terminology. Someone used the expression DAO fork number 2. We've talked about that many times on this channel. Back during the DAO days, they actually had to break the immutability of the Ethereum blockchain and roll the block back. Some of the other developers on the call said that wouldn't be, implied that it maybe wouldn't be feasible in this case. Others said that this would be, such a thing would be like too painful. Someone used the term too painful for mainnet. It would just be written into the annals of history as another bug, just like the parity bug back in the day. People talked about this, if such a thing happened, maybe they would just have this technical debt that can be paid off down the road. Some people felt like it takes too long to pay off this kind of technical debt if a bug like this is allowed to exist. There's talk of, maybe being able to fix it in the next hard fork, that kind of thing. But it was very clear that there wasn't really a strategy if a bug like this occurs. And somebody, to be fair, I mean, these are all very smart guys. These are all very smart, seemingly smart, competent developers. They obviously know what they're doing. In the end, somebody pointed out there are too many variables, too many possible types of bugs. It's kind of contextual, and it all depends on what type of bug pops up, whether or not you try to fix it, or it's just technical debt that gets paid off later, this kind of thing. But what was clear is there wasn't really a strategy. I mean, this call happened on July 23rd, and the scheduled rollout of EIP 1559 is on August 4th. It seemed that there was disagreement, and there was no real answer as to what would happen if this same kind of a bug occurred on mainnet. The attitude seemed to be, we'll deal with it if and when it comes up. Reasonable people in the same position as the people on this call would probably come to the same conclusion. And it's not really their fault. Here's what I think this tells us about Ethereum. You've got very smart people, and you've got a huge number of them. Ethereum is the consensus answer when you say, what is the most powerful player on the blockchain smart contract scene? Who's the biggest? Who is likely to lead in the future? The consensus answer among, if you poll, just people generally in the crypto space, they're going to say, of course, Ethereum is the biggest, because Ethereum is the biggest. It does have the biggest market cap. It's the giant in the smart contract scene. But the question is, despite the fact that it's easy to bet on the pre-Andy status quo, the status quo right now is that Ethereum is the biggest. So it's easy to bet who will be the biggest in the future. The blockchain that's the biggest right now. And a lot of people are making that bet. Smart people, competent people, very capable people are making that bet. But they're hemmed in to a future that is built on top of what Ethereum's already built. In this case, it looks like EIP 1559 has to go out. And this question comes up, hey, we saw this serious problem on the testnet with the client that's most commonly used by miners. What should we do about this? You'll remember the commenter on the agenda, Alexi here, says, I think we need to have a better understanding about what we're going to do if X happens, where X is any of the issues that happen on the testnet. Yes, it is unpleasant to think about, but we need some pre-decisions to relieve Geth devs from the responsibility to make all the hard decisions on the spot, which would be incredibly stressful. Alexi's comment was signaling there, hey, we could be in for a really rough and bumpy ride on the mainnet. And remember, mainnet deployment of EIP 1559 apparently is scheduled for August 4th. And we get to the call, he's trying to signal to everybody in the call, like, look, this could be really bad. We need to come up with an idea of what we're going to do if this goes down. And the consensus from the call seemed to be that there's not really a good answer. I mean, the very first answer to the innocent question was that it would go very poorly. There's this giant with so many people involved and so much momentum. They can't really go back and undo the foundations of the system to create a better set of options at this juncture. They kind of just have to move forward. And they have to move forward on 1559 because everybody's screaming about the fees. The fees are a giant problem. It's a giant Achilles heel for the Ethereum network right now. They have to move forward with something, but it appears on the testnet, they did run into these bugs, and they don't really have an answer. If the same kinds of bugs, same severity of bugs appear on the mainnet, it's kind of unclear to everybody what they'll actually do. This is a common trait of incumbents who are about to be unseated. Their vision was set long ago, too long ago, and it was based on the context of a time in crypto's development that was years ago at this point. It was a different context than we have today. But because they're still stuck with the same vision, it's a giant. It's a giant that is sightless. There's too many people involved in Ethereum. It's too big a moving creature. And there's nobody who can really change the momentum of this giant moving creature, even if the vision should really change. But because that vision was laid out so long ago, it's incomplete compared to a vision that might be laid out today. And we see this with both Bitcoin and Ethereum. With Bitcoin, the original vision of Bitcoin couldn't be changed when it became apparent that adding smart contracts to a blockchain was going to be very valuable and important. They couldn't add smart contracts to the Bitcoin blockchain. The vision couldn't be changed. The original vision did not include Turing complete programmability, and they couldn't add it because there was nobody who could really convince the entire community, the entire moving animal, to change the original vision. Ethereum came along and it unseated Bitcoin to some extent. Bitcoin was basically the only blockchain that really mattered. Then Ethereum came along and it took a share of that. All of a sudden, there were two blockchains that really mattered. And now Ethereum has gone on long enough and it's so big and cumbersome, there's not really somebody who can change the vision of Ethereum at this point. It just has to keep going forward. It's like a giant who's been blinded in both eyes. It was already headed in one direction. It was already running in one direction. But now it's sightless. It's like it took a look at the landscape years ago and decided what direction to run, but now that it's been running in that direction for years. There's too much momentum. It can't change vision fast enough. We see this story over and over again with incumbents in technology. People ask the question, why didn't Toyota or Ford or GM or Fiat Chrysler or Daimler, why didn't they create an electric car back when Tesla was small and just crush Tesla, take up all that market share so that Tesla could never get a foothold? The answer is they also couldn't change their vision fast enough. Their vision was internal combustion engines. It wasn't electric. They were too big, too bureaucratic, too many moving pieces, too many people. They couldn't change their vision fast enough. So the challenger comes in, and the challenger can go directly for a vision that's based on the context of today, not the context of years ago, because there's no momentum. They can start from scratch. And that's how the challenger is able to take so much of what once belonged to the incumbents. I think the same thing has happened to Ethereum. Ethereum was revolutionary when it introduced Turing complete programmability to blockchains, but that was years ago now. And it's time for that same Turing complete programmability to be transposed into the proof of stake world. And it seems that Ethereum has become the sightless giant in that it can't change its vision fast enough. The momentum behind it is already too great. And challengers who come along, like Cardano, seem like they have the upper hand, and they're probably going to take some or a lot of what originally belonged to the incumbent. Talk to you tomorrow.